Hey guys, how are you doing? It's Divine here for a pretty big merchanting review on a massive subject. I made two videos about the evolution of combat prior to this one. I suggest you check those out too. They could pretty much be added to this video, but I've got more than enough to talk about here. So I'm going to run over a lot of different subjects that should give you insight on all the changes in the market that occurred due to this massive update. Now the EOC has been out for a week or so, and personally I find it really good for the gameplay. But I'm not here to talk to you about the gameplay, this is about merchanting, and for the RuneScape economy, this update absolutely sucked. Okay, a bunch of items rose immense loads and there was a lot of profit to be made, but if you see the amount of items that crashed in return and how much the market is killed right now, it doesn't make up for that. Now, my method for this whole update was thoroughly researching all the effects it could have on the market. Literally anything. Now, if you even simply read Jagac's news posts and not did anything else, like no further research, you could have prevented yourself from losing a lot of money, and you could even have made a lot. But of course a lot of people don't do this. So I'm going over their news posts now, and I'm going to point out which details in them were important and why. Now, their first post about it back in May, where they say they are creating a beta for this, up until the release to get feedback from the players. The main important thing right here is the fact that bot makers will have access to the beta all along and will probably be able to get their bots up to date if needed. So you simply write a note down here not to invest specifically in anything because you think this update will nuke bots. That's the only important detail right here. And if you look at the results right now, bots are all back up within no time, and there was hardly any impact, hardly any trouble for them. At this point, people don't even really know what exactly the evolution of combat is. So they make their first blog post, and here the purpose of the evolution of combat becomes clear. Now the most important parts here are that they want to make you have to vary more in what gear you use, which indicates that other gear, rather than the mainstream stuff, will rise in price. A very important one here is that they want to bring up ranged and mage to melee level. It is essential to remember to focus on investments for ranged and mage stuff and not melee. They also mentioned that they will be adding armor sets to fill up gaps, something you can invest for because that stuff is not in game yet, but they do say they want to finish incomplete sets with boots and gloves, and more. Now this little piece of information became essential later on when the God Wars rework came out. I knew about this and I invested for it. I made a quick effortless 500 mil, which could have been a lot more, but it was simultaneous with Botany Bay. Anyways, you get the idea. Even a tiny detail such as them adding boots and gloves to a set can make you bank, so never assume it is unimportant, always note it down when you notice it. Now in this post there is just more emphasis on them rebalancing the combat triangle. There isn't really anything else, but if you didn't get this fact the first time, then you should definitely get it now. And here more emphasis on new equipment and that EOC will also work for skillers. These are just some details you should be noting down when reading these things. Now, I'm not 100% sure, but I think that in this post about the action bar, they first mentioned the removal of special attacks. That it should instantly make you sell your claws and god swords and PvP weapons, because those will definitely crash in price, because that's the only reason why they're high in price. And the rest remains unchanged, really. In the next blog, they mainly talk about how they want the game to be after the evolution of combat, and they give a warning about instability in the market, and also another confirmation about special attack replacements. After that, quite a big one, dual-wielding. The offhand equivalents are not in game yet at this point, so it may not seem interesting at first. And also because there aren't many valuable one-handed items, like the best right at that point were chaotics, and those aren't viable. But if you think about it, RuneScape is a game full of pures. The majority of the players love offense, and would pick dual weapons over a weapon and a shield most of the time. This indicates a decrease in the demand for shields, so Spirit Shield owners should be warned right away. And they also mention new magic weapons, but you can invest for those. It does emphasize on how much better magic will become, which I'll get back to later in the video. Here they write their final blog before the release of AOC, and two very important details are mentioned here. They want to make people use food at a cooking level similar to their hit points level, so someone with lower hit points would use stuff like lobsters instead of rocktails. And this should obviously make lower food rise and higher food crash, which is also what actually happened at this point in the game. And they also mention a nerf in summoning and prayer here, so you should note down no investments for those either. So the beta is released and we learn a bunch of merchanting related things already. RuneScape will become completely multi-combat, Poison will be removed from the game, Divine, Elysian and Spectre will be nerfed, and Arcane will be improved a lot. As you can see on a graph right here, right around when that became known, Arcane rose massive amounts. I could also show you the other graphs here, but you can look them up for yourself. Now things were quiet with the evolution of combat for a while, so people slowly started rebuying their stuff that they had sold previously to save money. They really didn't know when to expect the update, and yeah, here's the Dragon Claw graph, a perfect example, and this is before merch existed, so I'm still using the regular graph here. As you can see, when the news came out, they crashed to pretty much 6.5 mil each, which is really low. And I'm hopping onto the live graph right here of all the data we have. Yeah, and you can just see over this period of time how claws slowly rise up, also due to some updates like the God Wars update right here, and later on the King Black Dragon update. And basically they rise back up even though people know claws will be worthless once the evolution of combat is out. They just don't know when, and people keep using them on a daily basis. And here when the evolution of combat is announced, like when the actual update is going to happen, they instantly halve in price. And after that they crash back down even further, and when the evolution of combat itself is out, they crash down to 1.5 mil and even below 1 mil later on. So yeah, the biggest fail of pretty much whole evolution of combat is definitely Dragon Claws, to less than 10% of their original value. And this whole period here is just what I was talking about, the period during which people rebuy because they're unsure when exactly the update's coming out, and there was plenty of profit to be made there too. If you look at the regular graph right here, it's still around 5 mil in the end, and that's just not the price right now. And then suddenly there's a live stream in their series of live streams about bot busting and evolution of combat. And in this they also confirm that the evolution of combat is probably not going to affect any bots. And they also say this because they probably realized bots had access to their servers all along. Now, the funny part in this video is when, I believe it's Mod Chris L or something, he mentions that elemental runes are going to be more popular, so they're definitely going to rise. That's the first time I've seen a JMod say something sort of guaranteed merchanting related, which was pretty funny. And another fun detail was them saying they would not nerf red chins, even though whole RuneScape will be multi-combat. And they didn't nerf red chins, they only changed the weakness of the monster you use them on. Anyways, other than that, there really wasn't a whole lot of interesting stuff merchanting related in this live stream, but as for the gameplay, it was very informative and quite nice to listen to. Now on to the next part of the video, which I'd like to refer to as the noobs, the pros, and the weirdos. First the noobs, which you should recognize from all the stuff I just talked about. I divided them in two rows on purpose. The first row represents items that you could have prevented to lose money on by simply reading the news posts, which I just discussed. The second items are items that turned out to be worse in Evolution of Combat, and this was found out in the beta itself and pretty much confirmed later on. So to quickly sum up, poison removed, higher food less popular, special attacks removed, spirit shields nerfed except arcane, death and blood runes not needed for elemental spells anymore, brews less effective, and thus resource follow. Now the top line is just so much bigger than the bottom line, which just clearly shows you hardly had to get involved with the game to prevent yourself from losing money. Secondly, the pro items. We've got the lobster and basically most low level food here. As mentioned before, the most useful food for you is now the food at a cooking level that sort of equals your hit points. Then the elemental and combined runes. Mod Crystal even confirmed this in the live stream, though it can also go under items that were figured out in the beta, because that's a place where people figured out that death and blood runes will be removed from elemental spells, and you will now only need a bunch of these to cast your spells. Next up is Virtus, but I'm not going into detail about Virtus in this video. I already made one about it. You can check the link in the description. It was an investment of mine, so be sure to check it out. Then next up is Arcane, and as mentioned before, Arcane was the only spirit shield that actually sort of survived and actually improved, as it got the same ability as a Divine previously. Now Arcane made some pretty nice raises, which I'd like to show to you guys. Here you can see Arcane was still pretty low, only 33 mil, And then we figured out that Arcane will be just as good as a Divine in the game at that moment. So they took a massive rise, and these are just the Grand Exchange prices, so not even the actual prices they climbed to. I believe it's around 80 mil or so, or maybe 90, I'm not sure. This is an incredible rise right here, and if you even bought one, you already made great profit for your investment. And now here during this whole period, again, they remain pretty stable because people don't know when exactly the evolution of combat is going to come out. And then right here, a massive rise again when they announce it's about to be there. And after that, a crash, and Arcanes are pretty low right now because people simply don't really use magic as much yet. And there is also a much bigger stock of Arcanes than Divines and Elysians in-game. As you can see, I put the magic shortbow and rune arrows in the middle because I honestly don't know if I figured this out through the beta or if it was in some kind of news post or live stream or whatever. I really don't know, so I just put them in the middle. But these guys became free to play with the evolution of combat, just like Blue Dragonhide, to fill up a gap. And yeah, they just rose immense amounts, which is pretty cool. Like I get why they're added to free to play, and I hope those people have fun with them. But they made a pretty good investment. Now onto the Steel Titan pouch and the scrolls. The whole game became multi-combat, so people can train with their familiars everywhere. Now a good example of this is of course the Steel Titan, because it's the most powerful, and especially for Slayer this is super effective. Then onto the Abyssal Whip. Obviously now people can train any combat style they want with their melee weapon, so they can train attack, strength and defense. It doesn't matter which weapon it is. So the whip became more popular because you can now train strength with it too. And this gave it a pretty nice rise, and a lot of people wanted to test it. Then onto the Zared bow, which was by far the most amazing item in the evolution of combat. It rose from a starting price of around 80 mil to a high price of probably like 230 mil. I think that's probably the highest it went to, and that is insane for an item already so expensive. To rise that much, that's very rare, and the people who invested in these made absolute bank. Now of course they went overpriced and stuff, and the Armadillo Battle Staff was another example of an item that rose a lot because it was really superior in the combat beta. And these items were overpriced, but they're definitely worth it, and they're really powerful and really represent their combat style very well right now. Now just look at these insane waves Armadillo Battle Staffs have been making over the past weeks. There is so much money to be made through flipping here, it's really crazy, and that's why life graphs are so useful to have, because you always know what their prices are at. Anyways, let's get on to the last category, which are the weird items, the weirdos. First of all, the Torva plate represents Next Gear, and Next Gear has been odd all along because it used to be the only armor set that would give a life points boost, and it isn't anymore. And people have known this since the beta is out, and it has made them hesitate if they wanted to keep their Next Gear or not. Like, will it still be so superior? Will it still be so valuable once the evolution of combat is out? Next Gear has been fluctuating a lot over the past weeks as well, and if you kept track of their prices, you could have made really nice profit with short-term investing and flipping. Now, I don't really have a graph I can show you guys here to show the patterns they made, because we don't track next items yet on merch, but we hopefully will in the near future. Anyways, on to the next item, which is Bandos. Now, Bandos, it used to be sort of unique because it was good gear, non-degradable with a strength bonus. But now that strength bonus is gone, Bandos is just sort of a barrow set without a special effect and without a strength bonus. It's simply non-degradable, and that's really the only advantage over barrows. And it's not enough for people to pay a lot for Bandos items. Now if you look at the graph here, you can see how much Bandos crashed simply because people no longer want to pay that much for it. It's not that great anymore, and there's just much better alternatives in Barrow's gear. I do have to say this graph looks really great, but sadly the only reason for that is simply the fact that Bandos used to have a buy limit of 10 per 4 hours, and it was changed to 1, so this caused Bandos to fluctuate a lot. Now on to the next item, which is the Blue Dragonite body. And just like the Magic Shortbow and Rune Arrow, this item became free to play, but it actually didn't do anything. It didn't change in price at all. So yeah, personally I find this quite strange and sort of unthankful from free to play. I would have expected it to rise a lot. Now so far we had the newbiest item, which was the Dragon Claws, we had the most pro item, which was the Zared Bow, and now we're on to the weirdest item, which was the Master Wand. Now honestly, they did this whole rework for their evolution of combat of every item in game. They balanced everything, they took everything into account, and then they come up with something weird like this. For some retarded reason, they give the Master Wand, like out of all the ones, the Master Wand is the only one that gets damage percentage bonus. Now it's a level 60 wand, and they make it better than level 70 and a level 80 wand, which are the Aram's and Vertus wands. Honestly, Jagex, seriously? Are you guys kidding? I'm not going to spend any more words on this. Yeah, just look at the graph right here. People were really surprised by this. It hardly even rose before this, and now they took a big jump, and the Grand Exchange graph is so much behind. If you look at the forums here, people are buying and selling these things around like 20 to 25 mil around the day they were updated. It's just plain ridiculous. I don't get how they can do this. Oh yeah, I was going to stop talking about this. Let's move on to the next item. And the next item are bolts. Now bolts are a bit strange because, I mean, range got buffed. Range is up to the level melee is, and you would expect people to make a lot more use of bolts now that there's dual crossbows, but apparently not. Like, a lot of people expect that bolts to rise because range would become more popular, but Jagex has divided the weaknesses of monsters in stuff like bolts, arrows, thrown weapons, and this caused bolts to actually be less popular, and that's why they crashed, which you can see on the graph right here, and the same goes for all the other bolts really. On to bones. Now bones were really weird because Jagex announced a long time ago that they would nerf protection prayers to only 40 to 50% protection. Now this made people doubt, like, is prayer going to be good or not, because they also added ranged and mage equivalents of turmoil, and if you think about it, if you're not going to use a protection prayer on a boss, you're going to use soul split more, and you're going to use soul split more in general if monsters are going to hit higher. So would this make bones rise because people wanted higher prayer or not? It also isn't affecting your combat level anymore, so are pures going to train their prayer or not? It was really a difficult subject, and a lot of people were unsure what exactly was going to happen with these, and in the end they ended up crashing because a large supply of bots, of course, and prayer didn't turn out to be a whole lot more important than it already was in the game. Next up we've got cannonballs, and cannonballs were quite interesting for me personally. The whole game becomes multi-combat, and well, what's going to happen to these? Because if everything is multi-combat, people can use their cannons everywhere. So at first I considered putting my bank into them because I thought they would really be immensely popular, but after a while I started realizing that Jagex would probably implement some kind of nerf to prevent people from training everywhere with these, especially with the different weaknesses to monsters and their strengths against the rest. Now if you see, during this whole period of time, cannonballs remained fairly high, and then after a while, like here, people started realizing that they would actually not be that useful. Like, they would still have use, of course, but not as useful as they were in the past, and this caused them to crash. Now if I'm just going to zoom in here, honestly, look at this graph. Cannonballs is probably one of the most fluctuating items ever. It's so crazy how many waves this makes during the days. If you just look, let me zoom in a bit further. If you just look here at the difference between a high and a low price in a day, like here you got 246 high and 158 low. This is the graph of 1 day time. If you look at how immensely much it fluctuates, pretty much at any point ever, these guys are almost never stable. It's quite an interesting item. Anyways, let's get on to the last item, which is the red Chinchompa. So I mentioned these before already. Jagex said they would not nerf red chins, but the weakness of the monsters people usually train on, which are the monkey skeletons, was changed. I'm not sure what it is right now, but yeah, it was changed, so chinning is not as effective as it was before, and alongside the massive amount of bots that are still at the red Chinchompas, this caused chins to crash to a pretty deep price. I can show you guys a graph, but it's so immensely inaccurate, and we've only just started tracking the red Chinchompa with our live graphs, so there's really not much point in showing you guys how much they crashed. I can just tell you they crashed from 700 or so each to about 100 each right now, which is just pathetic. and quite a pity for these because they were one of the best sources of money making with Hunter. And that pretty much wraps up this pretty long video. I hope you guys learned some useful stuff here. Really a lot happened, so many different items changed, and as you can see, if you just pay attention, you can already make so much money. It's no rocket science, it's quite easy. Now there are a bunch of links in the description below for other videos regarding the evolution of combat, for our website, merch.com, and our Facebook where you can follow all our updates. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye!